Taxpayers podcast, where Mainers tell their stories, unfiltered.
Good evening, Maine. This is Chuck Ellis, and you are watching the Muddy Waters podcast, and we exist to help the people of Maine better understand what is going on here in our state by bringing on different people from around the state who have stories to tell that the mainstream media many times is not going to tell, or if they are going to tell it, they're not going to tell it accurately. And we do that by interviewing people and having them, again, share their stories. So, and one of the other things that I like to say is the mainstream media really wants you to be hyper-focused on what's going on nationally and only thinking about what's happening in Washington rather than what's happening in your backyard. So this is why we interview school board candidates, city council, or all that kind of stuff. And today we are fortunate to have with us a candidate for, I was going to say city council, town council in the town of Windham, Michael, I should say, Russin. Not Russian, but Russin.
Russin, that's right. You got it, Chuck.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you so much for joining the podcast. And also just a huge thanks to anybody who's willing to put their name out there because politics can be a nasty game. And whether you get elected or not. And so putting your name out there and being willing to stand up for what you believe to be true and trying to help make our world a better place. Because especially when you're talking about like school board and town council, like these are very thankless jobs and positions, but they're very important and integral to our the functioning of our society. They're actually the bedrock of American our democratic republic. Some people call it a democracy. Some people are like, it's a constitutional republic, and it is. Right. That's what people mean when they say democracy. But okay. But anyway, yeah. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah, of course. And Chuck, thank you for doing what you do, man. I mean, honestly, having a podcast like this where you allow people to get on the air, express their beliefs, you're giving a platform to common people that might not otherwise have it. Like you said, the mainstream media sort of dominates the narrative, right? So with you doing a podcast like this, Chuck, it's so impactful because it allows for normal guys like me that, as you said, thankless jobs, school board, council, that's where it starts, right? Everybody wants things to change, right? We all want things to change. We all want to see things get better. But at the end of the day, it comes down to what are you willing to do? Are you willing to put yourself out there? Are you willing to put your name out there, your face, your beliefs on the line, and more importantly, put in the work? And, like I said, you having a show like this gives guys like me and many others, some of the other great guests, as I was listening through some of your episodes here, the opportunity to get on the air and share our views and talk about why we're doing what we're doing, man. What you're doing here, Chuck, it's of paramount importance, man. So thank you to you as well. And thank you for having me here today.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing any good at all. I think I am. I think that this is really valuable. I think really important to the narrative and conversation, which is why I spend so much time doing it. My wife actually, both yesterday and today, is like, "Would you do a podcast every day?" And I'm like, "No, it'll be the fourth one this week." But last week I only had two. And so she is like it's funny, when I first started the podcast, she would listen to almost every one of them, but now it's like I don't think she's listened to one in quite a while. The one of the most recent ones that she actually paid attention to was because like I actually secretly had her I had my phone sitting right here where people couldn't see it, and I could see her and she could see me while I did the whole podcast.
Nice.
So that was kind of fun,
She was front and center. That's cool.
Sneaking that in, but yeah, I mean, I obviously I do this because I think that this is something that's necessary, and we need to have a voice for people, because again, like some of the stuff we're going to get into today, where things get thrown out there, and how can you like respond to them, or how can you get your story told? There are some crazy people on the other side that are not even, I'm just trying to think of it. I read some report by this crazy guy I'm not even going to do him the dignity of saying his name out loud, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there. And so we try to like, and for the record, like I will interview and have interviewed people who are independent, people who are on the Democrat side. I had a guy by the name of Rafael Macias, who is basically, I mean, I would definitely say he's in the direction of being a socialist. Some people might say he's a full-on communist. I don't know. But I had him on the podcast, respectful, give him the opportunity to present his perspective and what he thought. I countered it. We moved on to the next topic,
Awesome.
Civil, gave people the opportunity to hear both perspectives. And I think that like civil discourse, I think, is also really important. But yeah, giving voices to Mainers is what we try to do. So you're running. Let's kind of do this. Like, this is your first time ever coming on. I know that you're running for city council, but like, who are you? Where do you come from? And then what in the world possessed you to say, hey, you know what I want to do in the midst of like not the most politically divided. We did have a civil war at one point, but we're pretty close.
I was gonna say we're pretty close, man.
We're like in an ideological civil war at the very least. It hasn't gotten militant or anything like that. But what possessed you, especially in a world in the digital age where there's so much stuff that could be pulled up about you? What possessed you to decide that, hey, now is the time. Now I want to get involved in politics. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question, Chuck. And I just a little bit about me. I was actually born in Nashua, New Hampshire.
Wait, you're from away?
Oh yeah.
Just continue.
I sure am. Far away, distant land of Nashua, New Hampshire. And we had actually moved. My dad's blue collar die casting job took him out to Buffalo, New York, south of Buffalo. And that's where I went to high school. I graduated top of my class. I went to Allegheny College in Meadville, Pennsylvania, which is outside of Pittsburgh, where I studied managerial economics. Actually left college I think it was exactly one semester early, and jumped into the life insurance field, where I had an awesome 10-year-long career, very fruitful career. I moved all over the country and started all kinds of different satellite offices for the company, had a lot of success. And one of those satellite offices was here in Portland. So it was funny. The owner at the time asked us, it was me and 3 other directors, and he said, whoever can make their best case to send their best person to New England gets the territory. And I remember seeing all the other guys think about who they were going to send. I'm like, I'll go myself. Like, I will go. And that pretty much, the owner at the time was like, well, that's an open and shut case. So he sent me out here, and that's how I ended up back this way in Portland. And so I actually ended up leaving that company probably about 3 or 4 years ago. Started a staffing company that was recently acquired. I started a software company. We're in the works of getting that acquired right now. I started a second staffing company on top of the first one, and I do some personal development and fitness coaching on the side as well. I'm a father to 3 beautiful girls, Ada Jane, Eloise Marie, and Magdalene. We had 3 babies in 3 years. So my wife was pregnant for like 3.5 years straight. I didn't even remember what she looked like, not pregnant. So we live in South Windham right now, out in the middle of the woods off of Webb Road here. We've got ducks and chickens and all that. But so just a little bit about me, but really, it goes back to what I had said in the opening. Why did I decide to do this? And getting into this, I knew that I was opening up a can of worms. I am a highly, I don't know what you want to say, controversial person. I've got an interesting past, and I knew what I was getting myself into when I started this. But as I said at the beginning, we can sit here and wish that the world would be different, right? We could sit here, we can make all of the social media posts, and we can argue with all the people in the comments sections, and we can complain and cry and all this other stuff about how we wish things were better. And ultimately, I was faced with a decision. My good friend Adam Zajac, for school board, I'm sure you've heard his name a couple of times. Adam actually approached me and said, listen, man, if I make the run for school board, we would love for you to go for town council. And actually him and a group of business owners in town got together and said, listen, Mike, we really want you to run. And I was faced with that decision. And I said, you know what? You could either be about it or not. You know what I mean? You could talk about it or you could be about it. And it's about time that men started to stand up and be about it. So I made the decision to step forward and run for town council as a result of that.
Well, that's awesome. I think, I mean, we need, like I said before, we need more people who are willing to like get involved and roll up your sleeves and, try to make positive change in our town. So what about what are the issues when it comes to like town politics that are the things that you feel like need to be addressed? Like what's your, like, why are you specifically running for that, if that makes sense?
That's a great question, Chuck. Really at the end of the day, what I'm getting more and more fed up with as time goes on is waste, bureaucracy, right? And, the big thing here in Windham are the property taxes. Okay. This is a growing town. It's going to continue to grow. Yeah. Whether you like it or not, it's just an inevitability, right? My thing is, how can we preserve the character of the town, small town Maine, preserve that character, preserve the integrity, keep things safe, while also responsibly managing the growth? And, when I sit back and I look at this area, there's so much potential. And I think to myself, like, listen, I don't have all the answers. I'll never pretend to have all of the answers. That's not my job to have all the answers. My job as a future councilman is to put the people in the right positions that do have the answers. So my goal as a councilman is to grow responsibly, preserve the character of the town, but also make sure that the residents' pocketbooks aren't the only ones funding the growth, right? There are a lot of different and interesting ideas that we have in terms of being able to keep property taxes very, very low where they're at, or even lower them without having to. And again, what I should say is this, is that there is a way that we can keep property taxes manageable while also managing the growth and using that growth to fund the projects and the other things in the tax base in the town, right? And I have the entrepreneurial skills to put the right people in the right positions to make sure that that happens.
That's awesome. Well, I think that's really important. And sorry, I'm stretching my neck. It's a little annoying, but I feel like there are a number of towns, in Cumberland County in particular, that are dealing with some similar challenges, right? Like I think there is a committee that was formed, people just getting together with the same idea in Scarborough, I think, if I'm not mistaken, with a similar issue, because Scarborough was growing really, really aggressively, and the town's feeling like, man, number one, there's a lot of additional costs that's coming in that the existing taxpayers are having to pay. They're doing TIFs for residential property. Generally speaking, for the record, a very big fan of TIFs when you're dealing with commercial property. But when you're dealing with rentals, it's a bit of a different story, because like there's a lot more cost in particular. This has nothing to do with your town, but like there's a lot more cost that comes in when you build more houses, because then a bunch of more kids are going to be added to the school system. And now there's additional cost there. And if they're not paying the taxes, that's how a TIF works, just for the record, right? For people who might not know, a TIF it's a way to encourage economic development in a way that, like, one of the benefits that you give to people who do the economic benefit is they don't have to pay the full amount of the taxes that they would end up having to pay on that property for what it will be worth when the project is completed. They don't have to pay those taxes immediately. Basically, they have a period of time in which they will get tax kind of refunds, essentially. They'll still be assessed the taxes, they'll have to pay them, and then they'll get them back. But that, like, over time, like that decreases year over year over year. Makes a lot of sense when you're dealing with commercial. Does not make a lot of sense when you're dealing with residential, because of what I just described, if that makes any sense. This doesn't have to do with Windham, but it's an example of there are other towns that are dealing with lots of growth, and the fact that the existing taxpayers are having to, cover the cost of that growth.
Right. Right. And that's a problem. And, again, the biggest thing for me is I want to pop the hood. I want to take a look. One of the very first things I was talking about, and I mentioned this on the panel that we had a couple nights ago at City Hall, that, I want to do an audit. I want to really peel things back. I want to take a very close look at everything and an independent audit and see, where are we wasting money? Where can we tighten things up? Because for me, again, as an entrepreneur, I'm looking at efficiency, right? How can we do more with less? Okay, how can I take Grandma Jane's up the road? Every dollar to her matters. Every single dollar that comes into her house. She's retired. She's on a fixed income. She got her medications. Every single dollar that goes into her house. I mean, literally, some of these older people in our communities. I mean, it's right down to that last dollar. How can we make that go further? And again, how can we restrict? How can we take less from Grandma Jane, for example? So, that's one of the very first things I'd be looking at is efficiency and audit. Like, let's see where we're wasting. Because you and I both know, I think you and I agree on a lot of things here. Chuck said there's a lot of waste in the government, a lot of waste and a lot of bureaucracy. And that would be the very first thing I'm looking at.
I think we need more regulations, and I think we need more government workers. No, I'm just kidding. No, yeah.
Yeah,
there's,
I thought we were on the same side.
I was gonna say it would be great if it was April Fool's, because then I could tell a joke. But instead, it's Halloween, I guess.
Halloween. You scared me.
Yeah, I did. I scared you. Yeah, boo. But no, obviously, yeah. There's so much government waste, and one of the problems is that people are always thinking about. They're always trying to justify things that are as though they're necessary, and there's so much even at these town levels that is spending that is just like, it's really more like wants more than needs. And then, like, I had another city council or town council candidate, or actually it's a select board, I think, for this one a little while back, a guy named Charlie, and he was talking about how, like, one of the problems that he sees is, if my mind will work, one of the challenges is like not doing long-term planning. So we're spending money, but we're not planning for necessary infrastructure updates that we know are going to be needed, right? And so there are like, so for instance, if you have a town sewer system, right? Like, you need to plan for, as that becomes, like, eventually that's going to become obsolete, like the current existing system. So you're going to have to plan for that. And so many towns, part of the reason there's been tax increases in some towns, I don't know about Windham, but is because towns did not plan for that, and then all of a sudden had to do it. And now they take out these bonds to do it. So at least, I mean, they don't have to pay it all up front, but that's increasing the cost for everyone, basically for a long period of time, rather than planning for it and preparing for it. But the reason they didn't do that is because they wanted to spend money over here, and so they're like, we better cut spending here, because we can say that we're keeping the taxes down, when in reality we just shouldn't be spending money over here. But anyway, so have there been any areas, like, as you've obviously, once you get in, you want to, kind of look under the hood, so to speak, and kind of figure out where those things are. But are there any things that you already can see that you feel like the state that Windham is spending money on, that's like, should it really be spending money on that? Aside from like the school board side of things, because that's handled more by the school board than the city council. Well, although maybe there is some impact there. I'm not 100% sure how it works. I think in Westbrook, for instance, where I am, the school board approves the budget, and then it goes to the city council, and then they also, I believe, have to approve it, and then it goes to the people for vote for the school budget. But I may be wrong.
The school is a big thing, man. The school is the big ticket item. But to answer your question specifically, it has been brought to my attention that there are a lot of things that we should look at. And I don't want to sit here and name them off, because I haven't had a chance to really dig in and verify. Typically, if I hear something multiple times, I'm going to start to pay attention to that area. You know what I mean? Like,
Where
if I
there's
hear
smoke,
a
there's
common-
fire.
Yeah, exactly. If I hear a common thing, whether, if I go out to lunch and people at the bar are talking to me about this over here, and then I hear that again later at the grocery store when a couple of the ladies pull me aside to talk to me and they're, they've got their complaints and gripes about this, and I hear that again, that's probably something I'm gonna put my eyes on. But anything specific right out the gate, again, I think it would be wiser for me to have a better educated stance on that before I start, because I do have some ideas of a couple of things, but I really want to make sure that I'm educated on them first before I start to throw people or things or organizations under the bus. So right off rip, there are probably a few things that we could reel in, and some of these things might be positions and things like that. So that gets kind of, how that gets, but those.
Yeah.
There's a list, but I like to check it twice, you know what I mean, before I start digging into exactly what we're going to be focusing on.
Yeah, but the overall point is it's all about efficiency and making sure that tax dollars are spent wisely.
Yes.
And that's what I'm hearing. And I think sometimes it's kind of funny. There are a lot of people running for governor, and they're in a similar place where they're basically saying, well, there's some things we're going to need to cut. We're going to take a look and we're going to figure it out. I think sometimes people want a more clearly outlined plan, but there are reasons why that doesn't make sense. And sometimes you have this idea before you get into something that it's really this easy. I can jump in and we're day one, I'm going to cut that. And then you get in there and you start looking around a little bit and you're like, well, maybe that doesn't make sense. And so I think it makes sense to have this kind of we're going to evaluate things. I've got some ideas or places I'm going to look. But kind of figure that out once you're in that seat. What's interesting about employees too, because I feel like this is one of those things where the I'd say that the liberals, I remember one of their biggest objections to Donald Trump when he came in and created Doge is that all these federal workers that had lost their jobs, and it's you mean the people that were stealing money from the American people, essentially either doing a non-essential jobs, which guess what, when you're using taxpayer money, you need to use it efficiently. And if you're not, I'm sorry, I don't care. Go join the private sector. Guess what? You're going to join the private sector and you're actually going to have to work in order to have your job. So I don't I get it. They're people, they have families, they have this, they have that. But I also don't if you're doing a job that is a waste of taxpayer dollars, then your job is unnecessary, and that's just something that should happen. And there, as the government waste disappears, less taxation needs to happen, more business growth opportunity comes, and guess what? There will be more jobs in the private sector, which is great. Go join that.
Go get a real job.
Well, essentially,
daycare is closed. Daycare. Right. That's what it was for a lot of these people. It was daycare. It was a daycare center. Yeah, it really was. It's a lot of these positions and what some of these people were doing. And, I see this a lot, man. And I've seen some of these, as these people were fired, people started to go retroactively through their social media, and they would pull up, there would be this girl that worked at this department of whatever in the United States government, and they would pull up a day in the life, and she'd mosey in at 10:15 and make a coffee, and then she'd go to the common area, and there'd be a foosball table, and then she'd go. It was it would be an 8-hour workday, nothing got done. She'd send 3 emails, and this is a government employee, right? I'm paying your salary, and this is what you're doing all day. Right. It's So I totally get what you're saying. And I think he's done a decent job. I'd like to see more cuts. But I think he's done a decent job so far of that.
It reminds me of Entertainment 720, what you were just describing. I don't know if you remember. It's a reference to Parks and Rec. Tom Haverford. Yes. He leaves and he goes and starts this other company, and literally they're doing nothing and they're just burning through cash. And so and that's what a lot of these government jobs are. But that's national. Let's focus more on what's going on in Windham, I guess, and so obviously what you're doing there, and so obviously you're looking to come in, and all of a sudden out of nowhere, seemingly out of nowhere. One of the things that happens, again, in the political is this is actually one of the reasons that I had a lot of reticence myself to get involved in politics. And I think a big part of the reason that a lot of people tend to be resistant, because everybody's like, well, if I go into this, things that I've said in the past, or things that I've done in the past, or things that I've been accused of, or whatever, are going to end up getting thrown into the public light. And rather than me being evaluated based on who I am today, or based on what I really believe, or whatever, I'm going to be evaluated based on we'll call it maybe a hit piece, right? And so I was very resistant, partly because I also thought about the fact that, like, some of this will impact my family as well, as I become more of a potentially public figure. There is an impact on that for them, and I wanted to avoid that. But anyway, I would say God pushed me into politics using my now father-in-law. But yeah, so let's talk about that side of things. So you're trying to run to go and help your town do better, and then the Portland Press Herald apparently reaches out because they've got some questions about a story that they're writing that was obviously favorable for you, right?
Yeah, very favorable. I tell you what, those guys just stand up through and through. I mean, they were as unbiased as it could possibly be. They shared all of my quotes. They shed light on both sides of the story. I was super impressed with those two young gentlemen and their journalistic integrity. No, I mean, at the end of the day, man, when I got that call, I knew exactly what it was going to end up being, regardless of what I did or didn't say. And we had I think it was about a 40-minute long interview. And this is my impression, and I could be wrong. But at the outset of the interview, I think that he was expecting a much different reaction from me, maybe one of a little bit of fear, or, oh, no, I didn't say that. Or I think he was expecting a different reaction from me. And, by the end of the interview, he was fumbling, stumbling, forgetting where he was. It was interesting how the confidence level from the beginning to the end kind of faded on his end. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I stand by what I say, and I mean what I say, and what you see is what you get. It's funny that after 45 minutes of phone conversation, I think they pulled one direct quote. So I knew walking into that, he already had his 3 or 4 things he was going to talk about, and whatever I had to say didn't really matter, right? But honestly, what's interesting about this, Chuck, is after that article came out, which I have been the subject of several hit pieces at this point. This is nothing new to me. It rolls off like water on a duck. I got a lot of support. I had people DMing me. I had people texting me. I had people calling me. I had my whole Instagram call. I actually posted the article myself to my Instagram page. Excuse me. And there was an outpouring of support. And this is what I've always said, Chuck, is that the truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. You just let it out. It defends itself, right?
Yeah.
And I think now people are smarter than most politicians and most media outlets give them credit for, is that people now, their BS detectors are a little bit more finely tuned. And at the end of the day, people don't, and this is my honest to God, real true opinion. People are so tired of being lied to by politicians that look and act and sound a certain way and are not that way behind closed doors. I think what you're going to see, and Trump really kind of showed this, to be honest with you. Like, if anything, Trump kind of paved the way with this, is like, you get this brash, Does he always say the right things the right way? Could this have been managed differently? Sure, whatever, right? But at the end of the day, I think that people appreciate the fact that the dude says what he means and means what he says. And at the end of the day, on my end, at least the impression I'm getting is that I've got more support from people because they know I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, and I probably have some views that even to some people are, and this is the cool part, and this is what I'll finish on, is that I can't tell you how many people I've had say, hey, Michael, I don't agree with you on everything, but I agree with you on most things, and I believe in you as a person. And because of that, I'm willing to overlook these 3 or 4 things over here that we don't agree with and put my support behind you. And that's really, after this article, I got a lot of that. And people aren't falling for the nonsense anymore. People aren't falling for the hit pieces anymore. People aren't falling for the smear pieces anymore. And if anything, it shows, it's a demonstration of a lack of substance and a lack of integrity. Had they wanted to do a really good piece with me, we should have sat down like this, and they could have had the opportunity to get on air with me just like this and ask me. There were no questions about policy. There were no questions about what my goals and visions were for Windham. None of that. It was weird questions about different social issues that have nothing to do with Windham in the past and this. And it's, at the end of the day, man, I really think that people are privy to this stuff now, that the hit pieces don't do what they used to do. And I think that did more damage in terms of garnering me support than it did hurt me, if I'm being frank with you.
Well, I mean, the Portland Press Herald is effectively a failing newspaper that is struggling, to make money, and it's mostly losing money. These mainstream, I mean, this is kind of true of the mainstream media in general. It's become so biased that it's lost credibility with so many people that, yeah, I guess to the point it is like, okay, well, there's something that comes out about you in that you maybe believe the opposite. And it's like people have a pretty good, I mean, we're being forced to, but more and more, I think people have a pretty good BS meter,
Yeah. Yeah.
Where we're like,
you have to. You have to.
A bit one-sided, or not in line with truth. Like there's just something like maybe there's some elements of what's being presented in this as being is accurate, but like it comes across as being very like targeted, as though it's an attempt to go after somebody rather than like tell the story about what happened, right? Like obviously, for instance, and the fact that you're running for office does make this something that maybe more people would be interested in. And so whatever, but like they wouldn't have told this story if you weren't running for office. That's for sure. They wouldn't have tried to present this, even though the issues in it have nothing to do with being a town councilor. Right. but anyway, but do you want to get into some of the stuff that you were accused and kind of like go through the story? Like how much of this do you want to get into? Because I feel like that's it's totally up to you, but I feel like sometimes that can be helpful at like addressing some of the lies essentially.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And where I'm at, understanding, I have to set the stage for why this is the way that it is. I am fundamentally, to my core, what they hate. And I don't say hate lightly. Look at what they did to Charlie Kirk. Look at what they tried to do to Trump twice. Look at so when I say hate, I'm talking like hate. These people hate me. I am a white Christian male. I'm a father. I have an intact nuclear family. I have daughters. I go to church every Sunday. By all accounts, just because of that, some people on that side of the aisle would label me a Nazi just because I'm a white man with children and I go to church and I'm a Christian. I have Christian values. Seriously, it's not a joke. So I'm masculine. I'm traditionally masculine. I believe in traditional gender roles. A boys, and outside of that, biology. A boy's a boy, girl's a girl. It's no brainer.
Do you want me to send? I have a T-shirt I can send you. It says "Boys are boys, girls are girls. 2 + 2 = 4."
I would love that. I would say
all right.
But fundamentally, I am the embodiment of everything these people hate. Hate, right? And on top of that, I am outspoken. I can't be canceled. They've tried to cancel me, right? I've been in the articles, I've been smeared, I've been in the news, I've been blah, 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 blah. So
yeah, as you were mentioning, this isn't new information. This has already been out there in public. They're
years.
just rehashing it as an attempt to influence the election, obviously.
Yes. Yep. And that's their secret weapon, right? Is the cancellation. If I call you this word and it sticks, you're done for. He's a racist. He's a homophobe. You're going to lose your job. You're going to lose your friends. You're going to blah, 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 blah. And when those bullets start to bounce off, they get rattled. You know what I mean? And that is what you'll see with me, is that I can't be canceled. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not toning it down. I'm not going to stop, because as a Christian man, I have a responsibility to speak for and stand for the truth, right? So to go back and answer your question directly in regards to the content of the article and other articles that have been published about me, when I was in my 20s working in the life insurance industry, we were making, I'm in my 20s, we're making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year. I mean, it was very much like The Wolf of Wall Street. It really was. You know that movie with Jordan Belfort and Leo? Yeah, it was very much like that.
I never saw it because I felt like that movie was more glorifying some things that I wasn't interested in.
100%, totally hedonistic.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's not a lifestyle. And, I was born in a Christian household, raised Christian, and unfortunately, I walked in the way of the world for a couple of years. And I am deeply remorseful of that. That's a very dark period of my life that I look back on, and, just making money and fast cars and just the alcohol and all this other crazy stuff, man. I was very much caught up in that lifestyle for a little bit. So I'm a very honest person. I'll be the first one to sit there and say that, yeah, back then we were living a pretty crazy lifestyle for sure. We making money hand over fist in your mid-20s, hand over fist like that in your mid-20s, with really no guidance or supervision. You might do some crazy stuff. And really what we did was nothing crazy. We partied, you know what I mean? And that's just a lot of people in that situation would do the same thing, not to excuse it. And again, a lot of those things, thank God I have Jesus. Thank God I'm saved. Thank God for his grace and that covers a multitude of sins. But the one thing I really want to hit on is any of the accusations having to do with any sort of sexual misconduct are patently false. And, there was an investigation done where they had interviewed woman after woman after woman. And if you were to go back and talk to any woman that has ever worked for me before, it's nothing but sparkling reviews. It's nothing but sparkling reviews. And what had happened is that these people had used that as an opportunity to essentially try to sabotage me and destroy me, because I had started getting outspoken. I'd become outspoken. And as I said before, during COVID, I really started to get outspoken politically. I started to get outspoken about the transing of our youth. I started to get outspoken about some of the what I would call demonic influences over our children. I started to get very outspoken about that stuff. And that's when it all hit. That's when they used that against me, is when I started to speak out against the darkness, against the evil. That's when they tried to bury me with this. And I think that's very, very telling. And, you fast forward and you look at my life now, and you look at the way that God's blessed me. God has blessed me with 3 beautiful children that are all healthy, amazing, a beautiful wife, very successful businesses and things like that. That stuff doesn't happen to people that are doing the things that I was accused of doing. It just doesn't happen. Karma, God, something's going to come around and take you out of the game at some point. So I stayed as tough as it was, man, in as many ways as I was attacked and slandered and libeled. I bit my tongue and I just kept doing the right thing. And I just kept doing the right thing. And I just kept doing the right thing. And at the end of the day, I think that God has blessed me in a multitude of ways. And I had a lot of opportunities to seek revenge. I had a lot of opportunities to, counterattack, and I never did, because really it's in God's hands. And all of those people and the person that said these horrible things about me, truly at the end of the day, I forgive them. I do, because Christ forgave me, and I forgive them. And again, I think that there's a lot of fruit in my life that would support that, now as I've grown and I've matured and, I've got this beautiful family and things, I'm making the right decisions. It's a shame that I had to go through what I went through, but I'll tell you what, Chuck, I wouldn't take it back. I wouldn't take it back, because I learned patience. I learned love, like Christ-like love, like love that surpasses all understanding. When you've got people writing articles and saying this and all these horrible, disgusting, heinous things about you, and you have to sit there and bite your tongue and grin and bear it, just get up and go to work another day and go to work another day. My character has been through the fire. I've been refined. All that silver's gone through, the dross has been removed, and I'm not perfect. I have so much more that I have to work on as a man. We all do, right?
Yeah,
but
100%.
I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wouldn't trade it for the world, because it taught me what real strength looks like. And, for a long time, I got suckered into like the real strength, lifting weights, that I've got a sleeve tattooed. I'm 250 pounds, bench press 450 pounds. And I thought that was real strength, but now I know what real strength looks like, and so to wrap that up, honestly, it was one of the better things that ever happened to me, because it taught me true strength. It taught me true love. It taught me forgiveness. And now I know I can go through anything and survive. I can go through anything and survive. And not because of me, because of God, and truly it was one of the better things that ever happened to me. And I look at that, and it has prepared me. I know I have a big purpose. I know that there's a calling on my life. And I want to step into that the best way as I can as a man. And I couldn't do that without having gone through all of that.
Nice. Well, yeah, no, I mean, I think like definitely the scripture would say that going through difficult and challenging times are the things that like kind of prove our faith, right? And they but also like they prepare us, and they're opportunities to grow. And I remember the first time I had received anything. I used to work in campus ministry back at the University of Maine at Farmington, and we had a student that was really promoting some things that were in opposition to biblical truth. And I was very careful in how I handled it, but I basically eventually got to a point where I said, hey, maybe you should you're not really engaged as a leader the way that you should be. And there are these differences here. Like, let's kind of revisit that a little bit. And you probably shouldn't be like, the president of this organization, since this is not where your heart is. In the moment she agreed. Later on, I think her friends convinced her otherwise. And so this led to like multiple articles being written, first against the organization, and then specifically targeting me. So that was like my first, experience in the school newspaper. And it was like, it didn't reach like national or anything like that, but that really was the group of people that I was primarily working with at the time, working in campus ministry on this one college. And yeah, it was very eye-opening as to like what it's like to be I think hated for
Yeah.
for something that like, and all, again, it's a situation where one of my favorite parts is like, I literally, the way I handled the situation, she was leaving being like, oh my gosh, thank you so much for how you handled this.
Amazing.
Right. And I was like, yeah, if anything comes up, if you're like, whatever, I remember saying this to her, just reach out. I'm always here. And after that, she refused to communicate with me in any way outside of email, because I think her friends tried to convince her that I was just twisting and manipulating and being whatever.
Yeah.
And she believed them over me, unfortunately. And then what was presented about what happened, I never forced her to do anything. I made a recommendation.
Mhm.
She agreed with the recommendation. She never submitted a letter of resignation. Like, if she felt like I had quote unquote forced her to resign, well, she hadn't resigned.
Right.
Right. And so, like, if she wanted to like not resign, she just show up at the next meeting.
Right.
Right. But they wanted the story. They wanted to be able to make an issue out of it,
And they'll get it any way they can.
which they did. Yeah.
So
It's interesting having been somebody who's like been on the receiving end of slanderous accusations. I know what it feels. I know what it feels like. And so for the record, you're not a racist. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, I am not a racist.
Okay.
I am
like,
not. They would call me. They would give me many, many titles, of course, and there's really nothing to. You know how that is. It's like I said before. Those are their silver bullets. Racist, homophobe, transphobe, right? Because what that does is it eliminates any sort of examination as to what is this person actually saying? What does this person actually believe? Like, let's look at the substance, right? Because when you just use words like that, that's their way of just blink. Let's not even look at it. Let's just slap this title on it and move forward, right? And that's, we have to, as a society, as men, we have to eliminate that sort of intellectual laziness.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's like when it comes to the issue of voter ID, just in case you're watching and you don't know how to vote on November 4th, because early voting is over. So you need to go in person to vote. If you haven't already voted, November 4th, you vote yes on one and no on two. But, talking about like yes on one is voter ID, right? voteridforme.com to find out more details. But voter ID is common sense. However, they've somehow slapped it as being racist, which to me, for the record, is a racist comment, because they're insinuating that Black people are not capable of getting an ID.
Right, which is insane.
Which is racist. And then, like, here in Maine, they don't say that as much, although there is a lawn. I think they may have taken it off after I posted a picture of it on the internet, where they had like a sign up and it was like written very poorly, like they had third grade handwriting, and maybe not even third grade, right? And it basically said that voter ID is racist, right? And so like, it's like, okay, that's really silly. But like, most people in Maine aren't saying that it's racist. Instead, they're saying it's hard, challenging to the poor. And, again, this is one of the myths that's like the most ridiculous about question one in Maine, which is that this will provide a free ID to those who can't afford one. And so this which is actually really, really, really important. It's a really important thing to understand, right? Because I used to work in banking, and we would have people come in and they would need to open up an account. They had a check to cash, or they had to set up direct deposit through Social Security, SSDI. But given their current situation, they didn't have the money. In order to get the money, they needed the account, right? In order to get the account, they needed the money, right? This vicious cycle that these people were in, because they didn't have an ID. Well, this not only will this help secure our elections, and is it not racist, but it also will help people be able to get an ID, which they need for other things. So that's a really great reason on top of everything else. But the point is, like, people that they want to label this racist. And as I think I was telling you before we went live, I was out putting up yes on one signs in Portland with a friend of mine who is, an African American himself. And as I'm putting up the sign, and I'm married to an African, so as I was putting up the sign, somebody yells out "racist" or "voter ID is racist," and it's like, okay, guys, I'm in. I always I just go ahead, and anytime somebody says something silly like that, I text my wife and I'm like, hey, I got called racist again, and it's just like a fun little joke between the two of us because what's funny too, I'll just say this is like, this is how crazy the things have gotten. It's like, just because you're married to a woman of color doesn't mean you're not racist.
Which is just insane.
I mean, like, sure, there are probably like a few people out there that are married to people of a different race and are probably still racist. I mean, it's within the realm of possibility, but it's idiotic.
Highly
it's like so anyway, but this is the type of nonsense that that sometimes is dealt with. But yeah, this is what they do, is they throw out this card, that the racist card, the homophobic, the transphobic, and I hate the phobics, because like there's no fear, like
no.
right, like it's this nonsense.
Nothing to do with fear.
But they just basically make you out to be someone that if anybody were to support you, then they're supporting what's the term? What's the term? Gosh, a bigot, right? I think that's the biggest thing, is they're trying to make us out to be bigots. That's the biggest thing, and obviously, nobody wants to be a bigot. So there are two things that they're trying to do. One is they're trying to destroy you. The other is they're trying to discourage anyone who has the same views and values as you from ever getting involved in political office. It's just like when I would make comments, and there's this group on Facebook for Westbrook residents called Westbrook, Maine, Almost Anything Goes. And I made a comment in there about like, school boards and stuff like that. If anybody's interested in running, whatever. And these people, this might have been in response to that or something else, but these people, like, what they want to do is their real aim is to discourage you from getting involved. And so they're like, show up to a school board meeting sometime and then before you complain about how things are going. And it's like, what they're doing there is they're not encouraging you to show up to a school board meeting.
Right.
They're trying to make you feel like you're not allowed to have an opinion, right? They're trying to silence you. That's what they're trying to do. And so this is the goal. This is the objective. This is how they do it. And so that's where we need more people to stand up. And what's interesting is, obviously, you've been accused of a bunch of things, and they're essentially not true, or they're not essentially, they're not true. It's like it's an intentional slandering and political gamesmanship. One of the things I would be interested, given that you're going through this, to hear your perspective, because like one of the things that's happened with obviously you've got Graham Plattner, and he's coming out right now and he's saying, well, of some of the things that I said that people are upset about, I didn't mean, or I was in a different place in life. And like, he's trying to be contrite and all this other kind of stuff. And like, basically the leftists, many of the people on the left are just like buying his whole shtick. Right. And so I think some of them would say, okay, might ask the question, like, what's the difference between him and you? I think, like, and why should we trust you versus him, is one of the questions. But there's also this fun little thing that I'll just throw in there, that like some guy who's a contributor on a Facebook group called Maine Politics, suggested that the reason that Graham Plattner is going to be able to get away with this and continue running is because Trump did it. He paved the way by having all these skeletons in his closet and still being president. So therefore, none of that matters, and it's all Trump's fault. Ignoring the fact that there's been a lot of accusations of Trump, that and very little actual evidence behind many of the things. I'm not saying in his early days like he had some issues, but a lot of the like he's one of the things that I like to highlight about Trump, just for fun, because everybody thinks of him as being this awful, evil businessman. From what I know about doing real estate deals and doing business in New York, it's really hard, nigh on impossible, to do business in New York without paying bribes.
Right.
This is what I hear. I've not tried, but this is what I hear. Right. And I've never heard anybody accuse Trump of paying a bribe in New York.
No.
Right, which is interesting. But so like it just seems like, man, maybe there's a lot of noise here that's unnecessary, and it's just all an attempt to like destroy him, as he put it. Like, they're coming after me, but they're really coming after you, essentially.
Right.
It's like, because I'm trying to protect you, and I don't think Trump is perfect. I think he's making mistakes. Blah 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 blah. But the point is, like, what do you think of that whole like nuance of like, well, the reason Graham Plattner can get away with it is because Trump did it first, and then like kind of what differentiates you from, because like I think there's a lot of things, first of all, but I just think it's an interesting conversation. As we've been talking, I just think it's really interesting because he had some like communist stuff where he basically said that he's definitely a communist. He also had a Nazi tattoo that he tried to claim that he didn't know, but his former campaign manager is like, no, he knew what it meant. And so all this stuff, and he's trying to like backtrack and find a way forward, and all of his supporters are just like, it doesn't matter, he's for us. So like, right. I guess what are your comments to that? Because I just threw a bunch at you, and I'll just shut up and let you talk.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, nobody's going to be perfect. Okay. Everybody has skeletons in their closet, right? Nobody's perfect. And really what I think people want to see is somebody stick to their guns. Now, I'm not saying that you should have these crazy ideological views that are wrong and damaging to other people, and you should stick to those. But I think what people are going to want to stop seeing is a bunch of backtracking. And that's something that you'll never get from me. I don't backtrack. I've made mistakes, but what you see is what you get with me. And I think that, ultimately we have to have more candidates like that. We have to have more men like that are willing to stand up and say, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. And this is, I've made mistakes in the past, but, I stand by everything I've said. I stand by my beliefs, and I'm not changing my beliefs because of the political climate. I'm not changing because this group over here says this is wrong and this one says that this is right. Like, at the end of the day, people want genuine people. We've been lied to by career politicians for so long. We've been swindled by so many career politicians. Really what we need are men that are going to stand out and say, like, listen, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes, but what you see is what you get.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a great answer. And I think, that's what I've heard from you as I've talked to you both off the air and on the air, you have no problem being about this. This is who I am. This is where I stand. And this is, and so if anybody has any questions, I would just recommend having some conversation and give him a hard time, ask him some difficult questions and see what he has to say. And we need to, as a society, do a better job at being more engaged and being willing to put in the work and being willing to have these conversations, listen to people, and really figure out whether or not we believe that they're genuine. I think that's a big part of it. Like, I think one of the problems in our society in general is we've given so much over to other people to decide for us, right, rather than being people who decide for ourselves. And I think we need to stop letting the mainstream media, the media in general, like, tell us what to believe. Stop having other people tell us what to believe, and really go out and do the work. So I agree. I feel like we could probably get into some other topics, but I want to keep it focused on city council, and so and what you're trying to do there, rather than I feel like you and I could have a lot of really fun conversations.
We could go all night, man. I have no doubts about that.
But I want to be mindful of your time. I'm sure you're getting ready to go get dressed up and go to some crazy Halloween party. I'm just kidding. But in all reality, like, obviously I want to be mindful of your time. And is there anything else that you feel like is important for people to know about you as they consider who they might vote for on November 4th, Tuesday, November 4th?
I appreciate you having me on. I really do. I think, at the end of the day, I'll stand by it. I say it again. Everything I've said on this podcast is true, man. And that what you see is what you get. What you'll get from me is leadership. What you'll get from me is humility. I don't pretend to know all the answers. I don't pretend to have all the answers. And that's not my job. My job is to put other people in the position that do have the answers. And that's what I'm good at. I'm a master delegator. I've built very, very successful companies, multiple companies, and I'm a father, and I care. At the end of the day, I care. And, what you see is what you get. That's what it just keeps coming back to. And I think you always expect me to be genuine. So I do appreciate you though, having me on. This has been great. I've had a great time, and this has been good. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks so much. You've been a great guest. And I really appreciate, what you're trying to do. Like I said, we need more people. I really appreciate the other thing that I feel like I meant to comment on earlier is your comments about like being exactly what they hate. And like, sometimes I try to be clear, like they is like, or the Democrats or whatever you want to talk about. There is like an agenda that's not like your average. It's not your neighbors, right? So like, but like
Right.
the agenda, there is like by the people that are in charge of like the radical progressive movement. There's like anti-man, anti-white, and like anti-nuclear family,
Yeah.
and anti-business. So they don't like you because of that too. And anti-Christian element in our society that's really trying to destroy all those things. Unfortunately, they're trying to teach, like, it's kind of funny too. It's not funny at all, but it's kind of like crazy, I guess. Like they're teaching essentially in schools, and people are even purporting this, that there's only one form of racism, or actually that only white people can be racist, for instance.
Yeah.
This is being presented, which is, well, it's just, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. It's like batshit crazy. I don't usually swear on here, but it's like let's stop. If you haven't, just for fun,
dangerous rhetoric.
If you haven't watched this yet, I would find the Matt Walsh special, Am I Racist?
Oh yeah.
And know that is real. Like what he's doing there, those are real conversations with real people who really believe that crazy stuff. And yeah, it's unhealthy to be racist in any way, including being racist against white people. And they're teaching young white kids to hate themselves, especially white men. And I think that's troubling. And I think I'm really appreciative of other white Christian men who are willing to stand up and speak in the midst of a culture that says that you should not have a voice. They don't want people like us to have a voice. Again, they killed Charlie Kirk because, in part, I made a comment at an event we did last week. The Cumberland County Republicans put on for like a remembering Charlie Kirk event, and we heard from a bunch of younger people. But one of the things that I said, and this wasn't part of my planned speech, but I got up there and I was like, we're just going to say it, right? Part of the reason that they shot Charlie Kirk is because he was one person standing up, speaking publicly, while a lot of us, not more recently me, because I've been doing this podcast and talking about this stuff for about a year now, but like a lot of people have been afraid and unwilling to speak up and speak publicly about the types of things that he did. And I think that's why they were able to kill him, because he's the only one. Like if there were millions of us, right? Well, then they don't have it. Like, it's hard for them to hit a million targets. It's easy for them to hit one really effective target. And so that's something to think about. That's why we need more people standing up, speaking out, and being willing to do difficult things, whatever the consequences. Because if we don't stand up and fight, we will lose our state, we will lose our cities, we will lose our country.
Yes, 100%.
Trump, for those of you who are out there that worship Trump, and I really like Trump, he can't fix it all for us. I'm thankful for a lot of the stuff he's doing, a lot of these executive orders. It gives us a chance. It gives us an opportunity. This is like in World War II, where Churchill rescued the 400,000 or 340 of the 400,000 troops that were on Dunkirk Beach, but the battle still has to come. Those soldiers need to go back to work. Churchill did an amazing thing with that, but the war is not over. And this is an ideological war, but it is a war, and we need more people to enter into the fray. So I'm really thankful that you're one of those people who's doing that. So again, thank you so much for coming on. Man. Yeah. All right. Well, everybody else, we'll see you back here. I think Monday we've got a very fun, interesting podcast. I say fun and interesting. Definitely interesting. Fun might be an aggressive word. But we have a former teacher, or current teacher, who was the one from, I think it was, was it Biddeford or Sanford? It might have been Sanford. There's a teacher anyway, who resigned because she wasn't going to teach, autistic kids that somebody who thought they were a boy that was a guy but was a woman was not going to confuse those kids. So she resigned her position. She has since found another job, but she is coming on the podcast to kind of tell her story of that experience. So that'll be on Monday. So look forward to seeing you all back here on Monday. And thanks again, Mike. And you can hang out for just real